All right, welcome. We have Cheryl Kreikemeier from ESU here to talk about mental health with us today. And the date is, sorry, I've checked, December 18th. So this is a very timely time of year for this. Welcome, Cheryl, and thank you for chatting with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacy, for having me. I look forward to talking about this topic with everyone. So I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay. I am going to, all right. My screen looks different. So are you seeing the slide?
Yeah, it says mental health webinar, South and North Pole.
Yes, I figured this was timely, even though we don't have an inch of snow on the ground here where I'm at. Hopefully somebody has some snow for Christmas. We
Somewhere.
So, but yeah. So, as Stacy said, I'm Cheryl Kreikemeier. I work at ESU 2 out of Fremont. We have a whole mental health department out of our ESU 2. We have a huge department, but I'm also the Perkins coordinator out of our ESU 2. So I work a lot with the ag teachers. So I'm happy to be here today. So what we're going to talk about today is creating safe and supportive classrooms and bringing mental health into the classrooms. And hopefully by doing that, we can erase some of the stigma that surrounds mental health. And we're going to do that by talking about social emotional competencies. There's a common saying that acknowledges that if a student can't read, we teach them. If a student can't add, we teach them to add. But if a student demonstrates inappropriate behavior, what do? We usually discipline them, right? So why don't we teach them? So social and emotional learning in the classroom can help to address that question of inappropriate behavior. Preparing students to practice self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, practice positive relationship skills, and responsible decision-making will have long-lasting effects as we prepare them to be these global citizens that are someday going to help run the world. We have to give them a voice. We have to get to know them, and they have to get to know us. So have you seen this TED Talk by Rita Pierson? I've watched a million TED Talks, I feel like, but this is probably by far my favorite. And in it, she says that every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the connection, the power of connections, that power of relationships, who sets the bar high, who sets expectations very high, and then helps the students to reach those expectations. She also goes on to say that a student doesn't learn from someone that he or she doesn't like. So power of relationships is so very, very important. So I hate to admit it, but I'm kind of a nerd, and I'm a brain science nerd. So over the last 15 to 20 years, brain science has just exploded. We've learned so much about the science of learning. And so I want you to stop and think about who your favorite teacher was, K through college. So Stacy, I'm going to pick on you. Think about who your favorite teacher was. Do you have him in mind? Have him or her?
I do. Anne Holiday.
Okay. Now, why was Anne Holiday your favorite teacher?
I think it's exactly what you're talking about here is those relationships. You knew at the end of the day that she cared about you and was, somebody you could talk with, and she'd be fair about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's somebody that you connected with. It wasn't because she knew her subject really well, or she wrote really fair tests, or she didn't give a lot of homework, right? It was because you had this connection to you. So we are going to talk about these relationships and how it's steeped in brain science. Okay, so positive relationships help build motivation, and we all want our students to feel motivated. So consistent and attuned relationships. I'm talking about good, solid relationships that you have built with students have the potential to develop brain architecture. So they create these neural pathways that enhance emotional, social, behavioral, and cognitive competencies. I'm all talking about research science here. And trust between teachers and students create conditions that reduce anxiety. I'm sure that all of you have seen a rise in anxiety over the past several years, especially since COVID. So this trust reduces anxiety and increases motivation. Trust also sets the foundation for open communication and an exchanging of ideas between student to student, as well as student and teacher. Now, John Hattie, who is one of the leading educational researchers, found that a teacher-student relationship has a 0.72 effect size on student achievement, 0.72. Now, an FYI, 0.4 is highly effective or highly significant for student achievement. So he found that a teacher-student relationship had a 0.72 effect size on student achievement. So if we can have that strong of a relationship with a student, we can make that big of an impact on student achievement. And what he found was that these teacher skills develop strong relationships. And I know that you guys all have these skills: listening skills, empathy, mutual respect, caring, and positive regard for students. All of you have this skill set, or you wouldn't be in education, right? So just these powerful things gives the meat of having powerful relationships. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter found in our brain that gives pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. It's the feel-good messenger. So everybody wants more dopamine in our brains. So when a teacher authentically praises a student or has a positive interaction, the student's brain releases dopamine. And so who doesn't want more of that? So the student feels good and is motivated to feel that way again. So you give more praise and then the cycle continues, right? So on the flip side of that, when the student doesn't receive positive feedback, they're less likely to enter that positive cycle of motivation and learning. So what they say is that you have to give 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative in order to get that cycle of motivation or that dopamine release. So the positive interactions can be really simple. They can be greeting your students by name and smiling, giving praise for hard work, asking a student about something they're interested in, like maybe their pet at home or something like that. They can just be little things, but you have to give 5 to 1, 5 positives for every 1 negative. Now, I know that you all have these difficult students, like maybe an ADHD student where you have to redirect all the time. That doesn't mean that you can't give corrective feedback. We all have to give corrective feedback. But that just means that you have to give 5 positive to every 1 negative. You just have to up your positive feedback. So I teach an introduction to education class this semester. And I want you to know that I have 12 students, and 2 of those are going to be future ag teachers. So 2 out of 12 is pretty good, truthfully.
We'll take
And
that.
yeah, and at the beginning of the semester, I put a Padlet up and I had them all put up their 2 favorite songs. And then I created a Spotify playlist from that. And the result of that was really surprising. Only 1 song was repeated twice. And it really built class unity. What we found from that was that we had a lot of Swifties out of the class. We had some 70s and 80s rockers. We had a lot of country fans. We had some rap fans. But what it did was it let the kids get to know each other. And when we would play it when they had work time, I'd play it as they were entering class. If I asked if they wanted music, they said, yes, play our class list, or play our class list on Spotify. And it was just a good way of representing their diversity. Okay. Every morning or at the beginning of every class, you should be standing at the door to greet every student. And you've heard this before, but did you know why? You should be standing there to check every student's temperature, to see if they're having a bad day and to see where they're at. It's also a good way to get to know them. On Canvas or whatever learning management system you have, you should give the assignment of just assigning a few questions and having them record their answers. So give the assignment, you complete the assignment by recording your answers, and then they can record their answers back to you. It can be something simple like, what's your favorite meal? What are some hobbies that you have? Simple things to get to know your students. That way, it's so much easier to get to create these positive interactions with your students. Okay. I also know that there are some really challenging students who withdraw, who don't interact with you. For them, I challenge you to do the 2x10. Make sure that you are talking to those students for 2 minutes for 10 days in a row. So talk to them about whatever that student wants to talk to you about. By doing that, you are going to form a relationship with the student that will make a huge difference in his or her behavior. And by then, you will have formed a connection. So you want to get the dopamine flowing in the brain, do it 5 positive interactions per 1 negative interaction. Positive relationships help create safe spaces for learning. And by safe spaces, we're talking about 3 major factors. Most people think of the physical space, how your educational environment is physically laid out, what's on the walls, how your desks are arranged, things like that. That's one aspect. The next aspect is psychological. By that, I mean creating a trusting educational environment that allows students to participate, ask questions, take risks, and receive constructive feedback. And then the third way is emotional. By creating an emotional learning environment, a safe emotional learning environment, that's where you celebrate diversity, you celebrate self-expression, and you celebrate students' achievements. They can be classroom achievements, or they can be out of the classroom achievements, but you celebrate everyone's individuality, okay? So what does the love hormone oxytocin have to do with creating safe spaces for learning? We know that oxytocin's main function is during childbirth. It's for the contraction of the uterus, right? But in relationships, oxytocin helps us form bonds with other people. It helps us to create psychological safety. So when a student feels psychologically safe, they are much more likely to participate in class discussions, ask questions, and to do a hard assignment. So think about how this applies to your own life. If you have a supportive principal who has established psychological safety in your school, you are much more likely to challenge yourself and to try new ideas in your classroom. But if your leaders consistently give critical feedback, you might not feel psychologically safe enough to try something new. It's the same for students. So this is harder with some students because some students tend to overreact. And this may be caused from some traumatic experience or chronic stress. This can be caused by a number of different things. They may feel threatened in situations that other students find harmless. The brain learns that their environment is not safe, and it remains on alert to potential danger. It is stuck in the flight, fight, freeze response, where the amygdala is controlling their brain and not their prefrontal cortex. Their brain is flipped. Okay? So it is the amygdala that is keeping them safe and alive. So think of an animal that must decide whether to run or freeze when it sees a predator. The amygdala triggers the release of cortisol. That's the stress hormone. And it also releases adrenaline. This sends energy throughout the body. When this happens, learning cannot happen because the prefrontal cortex is not engaged. Everything is coming from the amygdala. So this is the opposite of psychological safety. So the student might look like what's printed on the slide. They maybe will totally shut down. They avoid assignments. They put their hood up. They put their head down. Or it could be the exact opposite. They yell, they make negative comments, they storm out of the room, or they get very aggressive and they act out physically. So building psychological safety is even more important for students like these. I'm happy to do another session on trauma-informed care if you want to learn more about situations like this. Okay, on to the next topic. Positive relationships build new pathways for learning. So our brain is so wired that we can form new neural pathways. Our brain has elasticity to it. And so by tapping into students' background knowledge to things they've already learned about will help them learn new information by activating these neural pathways in their brains. Now, this takes a lot of time, a lot of work, and lots of repetition. Just like if you just picked up a golf club for the very first time, you have to have a lot of repetition and a lot of work and a lot of time, right? So it makes sense to start where another trail in your brain already exists. Build on existing knowledge, like their hobbies or their interests. Ask students to share what they know or they have already learned about a topic. Ask them to research what they know. So when I begin teaching about the brain to my class of future educators, I simply ask them to Google 5 facts about the brain. They find out things that they already knew, but they learn a few new things, right? So you could tie new technology of harvesting with the technology of their grandfathers and tap into their students' background knowledge into the new technology. Okay, so you can use these positive relationships to improve student behavior. We all want that. So from birth to age 5, the brain develops the most. Long before they ever reach your classroom, their brain has developed the most. But the child's ability to learn is not over with. So the brain develops from the back of the brain to the front, where the prefrontal cortex is. And it's not done developing until the age of 25. And it still can continue to grow up until, truthfully, until you die. So one way that a student's brain develops is through imitation. That is how students learn a lot of their social skills and their behaviors. Studies have shown that when people observe an action being performed, it activates some of the same neural pathways that would be active if they actually performed the action. This is called mirror neuron system. Our brains are practicing the action that we are seeing, even though our bodies don't move. So start by thinking through what behaviors and social skills you're modeling for your students already. For example, you likely already model social skills like taking turns, cooperating, empathy on a daily basis. Now, you can take that a step further and explain the behaviors that you're modeling. The next time you're feeling frustrated, tell your students how you're feeling. Then talk about how you deal with your frustration, such as taking a few deep breaths, walking away, or whatever healthy coping strategies you use. Now, with a student who is impacted by trauma, your actions are very important. They will mirror your body language, so it is best to stay calm and to keep your voice calm. But I would recommend using your calm voice for all students. Okay. So now we'll move into the final part of the presentation about fostering social emotional competencies and impacting the whole child. So you teach agricultural content and you meet agriculture standards, right? So SEL, social emotional learning competencies, teach life skills. And you teach those too. So in 2020, a study of nearly 12,000 people identified the top 6 critical growth areas for entry-level employees. And they're written at the top in white. They were communication, decision-making and problem-solving, self-management, teamwork, professionalism, and leadership. So those were identified as the top 6 things people needed going into jobs in the ag, food, and natural resources areas. So those 6 areas all line up with social emotional competencies that you can see down at the bottom in the green. So ag classes in FFA allows students to refine interpersonal skills through interactions with peers, through collaborations in competitions, and exposing them to a variety of experiences. So I can't think of a better subject area than ag and through FFA than to teach these skills. But in a study that's 3 years old, these were the top 6 skills needed. So we still have a lot of work to do. So these are the
Cheryl,
top.
can I ask you to go back to that last slide? And I have a
Sure.
quick question.
Yep.
So I've seen much these similar statistics.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that such a high need area for employers versus content knowledge?
Mainly because they're the soft skills, they're the people skills, because they can teach people how to do the jobs. They can't teach these skills. Right?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But by exposing kids to different activities, and I'm going to give several examples of this, we can better equip our students with skills in communication, in self-management, in teamwork, just by exposing them to different opportunities. So the SEL skills are on the left. And then on the right are just different examples of things that you can do with these SEL competencies. This by no means is an exhaustive list. There are many, 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 many more things that you could list under self-awareness and social awareness. These are just a few. Okay. And now I'm going to give you just 2 or 3 different examples of activities that you can do under each of these SEL competencies. Okay. All right. For social awareness. Now, social awareness is the ability to understand the perspectives of and empathize with others. So this one is big, because teenagers are very much focused on themselves just by nature and where they're at developmentally. So conversation topics, you can do this a number of ways. You can make them very fun and light, or you can make them challenging, forcing the students to have a chance to think and connect. Now, obviously, you have to give ground rules and on what is acceptable and how the conversations are going to be handled in groups. But you can help with social awareness and by practicing empathy scenarios. And you can even turn them into realistic situations. So this is a great way of helping kids learn how to handle realistic topics. You can start small and keep making them more difficult as the year goes on. Class service projects, FFA is known for service, so you can do it small in the classroom, tied to a curriculum area, or obviously you can make it much bigger. Celebrate diversity. I think this one is overlooked a lot. If you have immigrant populations, they're probably coming from a lot of different cultures. So get a lesson on the country's food sources. So if you have a student from Guatemala, if you have a student from Mexico, if you have a student from Puerto Rico, they all have different food sources. Celebrate diversity. That will go a long way in helping to build a safe learning environment. Okay. Self-awareness is the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, and values, and how they influence behaviors across contexts. So becoming more self-aware is something that all teens need help with. You've got to remember that their prefrontal cortex, remember it develops from the back to the front, their prefrontal cortex is still developing. So reflection exercises are really underutilized in high school. So when you return from field trips or after guest speakers or even at the end of a unit, ask them what they learned and how they grew and make them write down, make them reflect on it. Okay? These reflections can teach empathy, kindness, social awareness, and self-awareness. They can be very powerful. And it's a good way for them to take stock and take ownership of their own learning. The one-word challenge is similar to writing a New Year's resolution, but it is writing only one word that you have to focus on. It is much easier to focus on one word than a whole statement. And then you can post these words around the room to give them a visual reminder. If you'd like more information on this, just Google one-word challenge, and it's the top hit that comes up. And adopting a growth mindset is looking at their strengths, and this will help them become more self-aware. Okay, self-management is the ability to manage one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations and to achieve goals and aspirations. Stop and think about the changes that adolescents are going through. They're changing bodies, their hormones, the changes that they're going through in high school, the transitions that they're making. Teaching self-management is extremely important, and it doesn't just mean controlling emotions, but it also means how to accept praise, how to graciously accept criticism, how to proudly achieve goals. All of those things have to be taught. They can't just be experienced. They have to be taught. So we know that our students are under a lot of anxiety and stress. So you can teach them how to use grounding techniques as a stress management exercise. So if someone is feeling emotionally overwhelmed, by focusing on their senses, it'll teach them how to ground themselves. So if they're feeling overwhelmed, you can have them name 5 different things that they can see around the room, or listening to energetic or relaxing music for 1 minute. They focus on listening, or holding an object in their hands and focusing on the color and the texture. Or they take 10 deep breaths in and out, and they're focusing on their chest rising and falling. Or they can eat a piece of candy and choose 3 words to describe its taste. So by focusing on their senses, they are learning to ground themselves rather than being overcome by their emotions. But you have to teach students how to do this. Okay? Another form to help students is expressive arts. Photography, welding, painting, singing, mindfulness, all of those are expressive in something that the student is maybe not even necessarily really good at, but as a way of expressing themselves. Encourage that. And one more that I don't have up there is we have to teach time management skills. So you have to show them how to manage time. Almost every senior that I teach feels so overburdened that I have to teach them how to chunk things, how to manage their time. So if I give them a large assignment, I have to teach them how to chunk it into bite-sized pieces so that they can manage their time. So teach them how to chunk their assignments so they don't feel so overwhelmed. Relationship management is the ability to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships and to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. I think this is so powerful in the high school setting that they have to learn to get along with everyone, maybe not be best friends, but to get along and respect individuals and from all different groups. So affirmation notes and highlighting student successes is incredibly important. This doesn't have to be the top finishers all the time. Although they should be recognized, so should other people. People who demonstrate a strong work ethic, who did a lot of behind the scenes work, who improved from one quarter to the next. Those things need to be recognized as well. Teach the importance of writing thank you notes, but take it a step further. Teach them how to write a proper thank you note and how to address an envelope. That is not taught at home anymore. So please teach them how to do that. Then work with peers on a class project or a service project for a common goal. But within that, you have to set up the parameters for setting expectations on everyone being involved. We all know that there will be one person in that group who wants to get the A and they'll do all the work. So you have to set expectations for everyone and teach them to appreciate diverse opinions and perspectives. So I know that's a lot more work on your part, but in order to help a student to build relationship goals, this is an essential part. Responsible decision-making is the ability to make caring and constructive choices about personal behavior and social interactions across diverse situations. So I think kids would think it's really fun to simulate real life experiences. Give them fake budgets and fake bill paying situations. Let them manage cities. Let them manage a farm, whatever, but give them real life experiences. Let them manage social media accounts to get those real world experiences. Tell them they have to create an elevator pitch for a product or a service or for their future career. And then you can give them ethical dilemmas, things that really test their ethics and their morals. And then they have to talk about it with their groups. All of these different ways help build their capacities in SEL. Okay, so I feel like I rambled and I rambled and I rambled. So we've talked about positive relationships and SEL competencies. So Stacy, what questions do you have for me?
I have a list of questions. I'm going to start there with the SEL. So it's a term that we're hearing, in the last year or two. Are these new concepts?
No.
Okay.
No, these have been around for a long time. They have come into the conversation of schools, I would say more so in the last 10 years, but within the last 2 years, They have become a political nightmare, do I want to say? And they're not political. They're teaching students how to be good citizens. So,
And I can say, going back for as long as I've been teaching, we've talked about those soft skills, or now I love the term durable skills, but soft
right.
skills, as we've talked about, that's always been a thing that industry has been asking for us to help students understand those. So this is great.
Right. I think in a lot of cases, schools have started seeing the importance of these, and they've been integrating them school-wide. And that's how I think they should be. It shouldn't be up to just the school counselor to go in and teach a lesson on these. They have to be embedded into all curriculums. And so if your school is doing that, kudos to your school. But if your school is not, please don't stop just because your school isn't doing it. You have to be doing it. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. That's absolutely. So I'm a big one on sending thank you notes, trying to keep the Postal Service in production there. But talk a little bit about, so how does it help me as the writer of the thank you note as much as it helps the person who receives the thank you note?
oh, wow, that's a great question. I think twofold. It's going to help your communication skills for one, and communication was that number one skill that was lacking. So we're going to enhance our communication skills. And number two, it's building relationships. So we have to teach students how important it is for the networking and for gratitude. You have to show that you're thankful for other people's time and commitment. So those three things there are essential.
Perfect. Colin Kubik, as those watching this will know him, down at Norris, he sends a lot of thank you cards, and he says it's not about the other person, it's about him, thinking about what he's grateful for and helping build up that gratitude in himself. Awesome.
Right. I was a school counselor long before I ever came to work at the ESU, and in May, I sat my seniors down and taught them how to write thank you cards, and I couldn't believe how many of them did not know, and how many of them did not know how to address an envelope. So I'm assuming it's the same way all across the state. So please, please, please teach them how to do that.
Yes, it has not gotten better, I don't think, Cheryl. I think
No, I don't think so.
perfect. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about kids with trauma and how we see that in the behaviors. As you're talking to teachers, do you think every teacher in every school is seeing a student with trauma?
Yes. Yes, I do.
And
Yes,
I assume that means little trauma and big trauma. It's all affecting students.
Yeah. Living through a pandemic is a trauma. And now how a kid reacted to that is going to be different, because some kids had a great support system at home, but a lot of our kids didn't. And how it impacted them is going to be different, but that was a traumatic experience. So all kids experience trauma. How resilient they are is going to be different. So like I said, that's another whole training. Right. But I just wanted you to be aware that it's not necessarily the student's fault that they aren't reacting the way you expect them to. There could be some underlying factors going on there that you may be wondering what's going on.
Yeah, awesome. You also talked about those grounding techniques. Is that important that we as adults also understand how to use those grounding techniques?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Don't I have to remind myself of them, and here I am teaching other people about them because I think we all get overwhelmed at times and we all feel anxious. And sometimes we have to take a time out and just give ourselves the grace to let ourselves rest and give ourselves a break, and that it's okay. We don't have to go, go, go. And I know how incredibly busy and how incredibly committed ag teachers are. You guys are phenomenal. The amount of work that you put in and the amount of dedication that you give to your students is amazing. But you have to take time for yourself because otherwise you're no good for your students.
And I think it's a really good reminder to each of us that we need to model those to our students. So it's not enough just to tell our students to remember those, that resting and those grounding techniques. We need to model it for them.
Right. And explain to your students what you're feeling and what you're going through, and explain to them when you're putting them in groups, why you decided these groups were going to be effective. Explain your processes to your students because that helps them understand why you're doing what you're doing. And that goes a long ways in developing those SEL competencies.
That's great. I guess that's all the questions that's the main questions I had here. This was fantastic, Cheryl, and I appreciate it. I know this is difficult stuff for many of our teachers to talk about or, to focus on, to take the time to focus on. But as you said, this is more important than the content. We'll get the content, but we have to get this stuff first.
Right, right. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. And I look forward to all of our teachers getting a chance to watch this. Are you willing to take questions if people have them after they watch this video?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me go one more.
Perfect.
There is my contact information.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, Cheryl. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop my recording here.